Good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha and I'm presenting my project titled Exits and Apparitions, Unexpected Subtexts in Contemporary Japanese Counterculture. My research focuses on a new generation of young female sexual minorities in Japan. I'm zeroing in on an underground countercultural dance party called Girlfriend that takes place in Shinjuku Nichome, which is a district of Tokyo known as the gay district in Tokyo. Takes place once a month and draws hundreds of women. The last event brought approximately 700 women with the theme of challenging gender norms and traditional notions of femininity and womanhood. I argue that this event, Girlfriend, is actually ambiguous, however, both an outlet for rebellion against these norms of gender, as well as a tool for reinforcing homogenizing messages of the mainstream. And this is done through the channels of global consumerism and global capitalism. So, beginning, with my theoretical framework here. I kind of am using a mesh of three theoretical frameworks. The first is the category of Marxian socioanthropology and postmodern critical theory. I'm using Michael Hart and Antonio Negri's theories of the multitude and the commonwealth. Essentially, the multitude is a net of workers, migrants, social movements, and NGOs that is necessarily created through global capitalism. And within this sort of web, there are movements to challenge what they call empire, which is sort of the nature of global capitalism and what's brought about through its propagation. Paulo Virno's take on the multitude is that the people who comprise it will necessarily seek refuge from the stresses and the difficulties of surviving in the global capitalist world through alternative lifestyles, alternative events, and places that they see as a shelter from what is the cacophonous nature of our capitalist world today. And Allison is another contemporary scholar who uses some of these theories. Also drawing a lot from the sexual diversity and queer theory. One of the really inspirational scholars in this field is Eve Sedgwick. One of her most interesting, I think, ideas was what she said was we are all different people in terms of our sexuality. And she meant not only are we all different from each other, I'm different from you, you're different from her, but we're different from ourselves every moment of our lives. Our sexuality is constantly changing. It's fluid. It's not something that you can put your finger on it one minute and say, okay, it's settled, I'm straight, or I'm gay, or I'm bisexual. These sort of arbitrary categories don't really fit the reality of what it means to be a human being. So, finally, I'm going to be using some feminist theory as well. And I'd like to draw mainly from the most influential modern feminist, arguably, in Japan, who is Chizuko Ueno. She's a professor at the University of Tokyo, and much of her research is on the political upheaval that took place in the Meiji period and how that sort of played off of Japanese nationalism and sort of imperial expansion. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. This section is called Nationalism, Finance, Capital, and Japan's Lesbian Community. The first area that I'm focusing on is called Mothers to Patriots, and taking place between the beginning of the Meiji period, 1868, and the end of World War II, 1945. During this time, many sort of uprisings in women's circles were occurring, and people were demanding more autonomy. Mostly, women were demanding simply the right to be seen in public. And the Japanese government and the Empire of Japan saw an opportunity to use that momentum to get women out of the house in the name of the empire. So a lot of training programs brought women outside to prepare them for war, essentially. And so in this way, feminism was sort of co-opted by the Empire of Japan and became a nationalist movement in itself. The next section is Mitsubishi to Mujirushi. Mitsubishi is one of the more well-known zaibatsu financial conglomerates in Japanese society. The zaibatsus were essential in the build-up to many of Japan's imperialist expansions throughout the 1900s. And another of the zaibatsus was the Seibu Corporation, which is currently a leading corporation in Japanese life, which holds a lot of influence over many, many elements of society, including real estate, mass communication, and retail. One of the more famous retail chains in Japan, selling everything from clothing to furniture to food, is Mujirushi. And Mujirushi really specializes in this sort of idea of individuality, sort of rebelling against what we think of as brand culture, and it's really sort of an androgynous image that Mujirushi is selling. And the owner parent company of Mujirushi, as I said, it's called the Seibu Corporation, is run by this family, the Tsutsumi family, which is really a kind of like a legacy left by the parent, this guy, who is Tsutsumi Yoshiaki. His sons took over the company and made this empire of retail and clothing that essentially sells, as I said, this kind of image of androgyny and rebellion against brand culture. This is a picture of what it looks like in Mujirushi. We have a nice young, somewhat androgynous young man here shopping for what appears to be donut holes or some other kind of junk food snack. But this is just kind of the idea behind Mujirushi. And the first Mujirushi store opened in 1980. So this idea of biopolitical production, selling of ideas, is very important to my project. Finally, looking at this concept of dosei aisha to bian. Dosei aisha was the term coined around 1915 that marked the moment when the Japanese medical and government area of society intervened in people's sexuality. Prior to the Meiji period, it was commonplace for same-sex couples, mostly older men with younger boys, to live for a period of time as a couple. And after the Meiji expansion took place, this idea was sort of spun around to reflect sort of Western Judeo-Christian belief that homosexuality is wrong, it's a disease, etc., etc. So the word dosei aisha, which literally means same-sex people, came about at that time. Flash forward a few decades, and the word lesbian made its way into the Japanese vocabulary. Japanized as lesbian, this word actually really doesn't describe a couple, but rather women who have sex with other women for fetishized, sort of pornographized, if there's a word, reasons, in order for entertainment of men, mostly. And it really doesn't have anything to do with what we think of in the West as being a couple, women who love one another for a lifestyle and commitment. So the community of women who were sort of lesbians as we think of lesbians took the word lesbian and borrowed a shortened version of the word, lezu. And the word lezu kind of adopted that same fetishized idea of what it means to be on video doing these acts of sex with another woman. They had nothing to do with love or with any kind of relationship status. However, in the 1990s, the sort of reclamation of this word took place, and the word lezu went from that sort of idea to bian, which is a word that the lesbian community itself has appropriated from the original word, and it describes what most of us would think of as same-sex couples who are female, who love one another, not for anyone's entertainment, but for their desire to be with one another. So this sort of timeline in history is also important to my project. And in the 1990s, before the word bian sort of was popularized, this is kind of a stereotype of what lezu-bians used to look like. This is what a common, I guess, self-described bian in public Japanese life is today. This woman is named Yuki Kaiser. She's the founder of a new magazine that is online, and it's called Tokyo Wrestling. No idea why the wrestling, but it refers to a magazine whose purpose is to bring attention to young lesbian, self-described bisexual, and alternative sexualities of women who are living in Japan and having an impact on Japanese society. The magazine, which is edited by Yuki Kaiser, is published in French, English, and Japanese. And Yuki herself is French and Swedish, and I think she's a quarter Japanese as well. So it sort of shows what the impact of globalization has had on this community. And it's just a really interesting magazine, and in that magazine there's a lot of information being published about this event, which I'm writing about, and I'm going to talk about that as well. My methodology for this project, I'm going to analyze the flyers for the event, including those that were published 10 years ago, which are available online to view by the public, and those which are most recently being used to get support for the event today. Also, I'd like to interview 10 to 15 attendees of the event, the women themselves, and officials, including a couple of politicians who have spoken out about this community, and I'm going to talk about them as well. And the sponsors of the event, which are very important to what's happening in this community right now, as well as the elites, I call this group of people, which would be the organizer of the event, whose name is Chiga, and the woman who I spoke about just now, Yuki Kaiser. Okay, briefly, I'll hopefully gain access to the community there by working with my past connections, people I know from living in Japan before, and some jobs that I had writing with certain magazines and newspapers in Tokyo. So, on to the materials. This is kind of a funny little flyer on the left here. It says, "Girls Belief." So this is sort of emblematic of the previous marketing strategy of this party. These are flyers for the event, Girlfriend. And in 2001, as you can see here, they're marketing towards women who identify as lesbian or bisexual women who wear briefs. And this is just a little funny little Japanese spelling error there. It's supposed to be brief, but brief, whichever you're fancy, I guess. Also, the flyer on the right from 2002 says Chubby Night. This is sort of appealing to women who, again, lesbian, bisexual women who are chubby. So if you're a woman and you're chubby and you like other women, come on down, tonight's your night. This is your moment in history and everything's going to be great. So this is sort of the previous strategy behind this event, was to seek out these very small, very specific groups of people and tell them, come on down, this is for you. Now, flash forward about a decade, we have these flyers. Same event, totally different flyer, totally different idea behind it. As you can see, they're very symmetrical, very cool. I mean, they look cool. And on the right, this is really important. This is Aikawa Nanase. She's a pop star from the 1990s who is poised to make a big comeback right now. She's married to a man. She has one or two children, I believe. And she's lending her name to this event in order to boost her sort of profile, I would assume, coming back as a pop star now. In her new video, which she's releasing, she's kissing a girl in this very hot, very, very sexy scene in a car, some little red Corvette or something like that. But as you can see, this sort of idea of women loving women is really becoming a sort of iconized pop culture thing. And if you can see, I don't think you can read this, but down here on the right it says sponsored by Moe Shandong. Moe Shandong is really the most popular high-end champagne that is produced in Japan right now. It's about $50 a bottle. And the fact that Moe Shandong is sponsoring this event is extremely important because that's a really, really big company in Japan and in Japanese life. Another one is H&M, which has also sponsored several events in this genre. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. My materials again, interviewing the patrons. On the left here we have some interesting looking young ladies who are going to this event. And on the right, not sure if anyone knows this guy, but he's sort of the natural adversary of this community. This is Ishihara Shintaro. He's the governor of Tokyo, and he's really kind of a proponent of the Japanese right conservative party. And recently he spoke out about gay, lesbian people in Japan, saying that they're deficient, something's wrong with them, etc., etc. But as I'll show, they may not be as natural adversaries as we necessarily think. And in conclusion, this is the insignia of the Tokyo Wrestling Launch Party, the magazine that I spoke about that writes us a lot about this community. And if you can see in the background there's the old Japanese Imperial Navy flag as a backdrop. to this event. So, while you might think these two sort of factions are at opposite ends of the spectrum, if you go far enough left or right, you end up back where you started. So, thank you very much.